Here's a story about pies. Not just any pies, award-winning pies. Pies that won over 300 first-place ribbons at the American Pie Council National Pie Championships. Pies so fetch, they built a restaurant empire. And here's the kicker. The company that made them went bankrupt twice in 12 years. Baker's Square. If you grew up in the Midwest, you know it. The place with the French silk pie and the free coffee refills, where you should get breakfast at 10 p.m. and where grandma took you after church. At its peak, Baker's Square had over 200 locations across America. Today, 9. That's right, 9 restaurants left from a chain that once dominated family dining. But the real story isn't just about decline. It's about how one catastrophically bad acquisition, buying a racist restaurant chain called Sambo's, sent the company into a death spiral it never escaped. It's about a Florida con artist who sold the same restaurant rights to 2 different companies and personally filed for bankruptcy while his victims lost millions. It's about private equity firms passing around a dying brand like a hot potato until there was nothing left to burn. Let's talk about how the best pies in America couldn't save Baker's Square from its own worst decisions. Section 1. Mrs. C's and the pie that started it all. December 1969, Des Moines, Iowa. A single restaurant called Mrs. C's opened its doors with a simple menu: soups, sandwiches, and homemade pies. The pies were the secret weapon. Double crust fruit pies, meringues, cream pies, made from scratch every single day. The concept was nothing revolutionary, just good home-style food at reasonable prices. But those pies, man, people drove across town for those pies. The restaurant became a Des Moines institution. Enter Pillsbury. Yes, the Doughboy Company. In the early 1970s, they saw potential in Mrs. C's and bought the concept. Being Pillsbury, they immediately rebranded it with the most on-brand name possible: Poppin' Fresh Pies, because nothing says homemade pie quite like naming it after a corporate mascot. Pillsbury opened additional locations across the Midwest, building out a chain of about 69 restaurants by 1983. The formula worked: breakfast all day, comfort food lunches and dinners, and those award-winning pies for dessert. It was the perfect family dining concept for the era when dual-income households were becoming the norm and nobody had time to bake a pie from scratch anymore. But Pillsbury's heart wasn't really in the restaurant business. In May 1983, they sold the Poppin' Fresh Pies chain, 59 restaurants, and a baking facility outside Chicago, to a Denver-based company called Vicorp Restaurants for an undisclosed sum. Vicorp already owned Village Inn, a breakfast-focused chain founded in Denver in 1958. Village Inn had gone public in 1982 as Vicorp Restaurants, Inc., and it was looking to diversify. The Poppin' Fresh Pies acquisition gave them a second brand and, crucially, a vertically integrated pie production operation. In 1984, Vicorp rebranded Poppin' Fresh Pies as Baker's Square. The name change required some delicate marketing. You can't just yank away a beloved brand name without backlash. So Vicorp launched a TV campaign with a simple, reassuring message: we changed the name, not the pie. The strategy worked. Customers adapted to the new name, and Baker's Square kept growing steadily through the early 1980s. Everything was going according to plan. And then Vicorp made the acquisition that would haunt them for decades. Section 2. The Sambo's Disaster. October 1984. Vicorp announces a massive acquisition: 175 restaurants from the bankrupt Sambo's chain, spread across California, Florida, and Arizona. On paper, it looked like a steal: instant national expansion, prime real estate locations, established customer bases. In reality, it was a poison pill that would slowly kill the company. Let's talk about Sambo's for a minute because the context matters. Sambo's was founded in 1957 in Santa Barbara by Sam Battistone and Newell Bonnet. They combined Sam's first name with the first 2 letters of Bonnet's last name, Sambo's. You see the problem? The restaurants featured decor based on the children's book Little Black Sambo, a deeply racist story. By the 1970s, civil rights groups were protesting the chain. Boycotts erupted. The company tried rebranding some locations as seasons-friendly eating, but it was too little too late. Sambo's filed for bankruptcy in 1981, losing $50 million that year. By 1984, most locations had closed or been sold, with only the original Santa Barbara location remaining. Vicorp thought they were getting a bargain. What they actually got was a nightmare. The plan was straightforward: convert the California locations to Baker Square's restaurants and the Florida and Arizona locations to Village Inns. Complete the conversion within 2 years. It should be pretty easy, right? Well, wrong. The conversion took nearly 4 years and drained the company's resources. Problems emerged immediately. The real estate was cursed. Many Sambo's locations carried the stigma of the racist brand. Customers associated the buildings with controversy. The locations were too small. Sambo's restaurants were up to 20% smaller than the average Village Inn, which seated 150 people and covered 5,000 square feet. They literally didn't have enough room for the full menu. Quality collapsed. Vicorp had to relocate mid-level managers to these struggling, far-flung locations. Management quality plummeted as experienced operators were stretched too thin across too many problem restaurants. Labor shortages hit hard, especially in California, where the Baker Square West Division suffered from chronically high operating costs and constant employee turnover. Florida was a disaster zone. Of the converted Florida Village Inn locations, 15 closed by 1989, less than 5 years after the acquisition. The Florida division became a money pit carried entirely by profits from the successful Midwest restaurants. The Great Lakes region Baker Square locations were generating an average of $1.9 million annually, nearly double the volume of similar units in California. The Midwest was propping up the entire company, while California and Florida just bled money. Vicorp tried everything to stem the losses: enhanced training programs, management restructuring, operational improvements. Nothing worked. The Sambo's acquisition had fundamentally broken the company's growth trajectory. Profits declined through the late 1980s and it never fully recovered. Section 3. The Angel's Diner Scam. If you thought the Sambo's acquisition was bad, buckle up. Because in 1993, Vicorp managed to step on an even bigger landmine. Enter Eric A. Holm, a Florida entrepreneur with a small restaurant chain called Angel's Diner. In late 1993, Vicorp acquired the rights to Angel's Diner from Holm. The plan? Convert underperforming Village Inn and Baker Square units to this exciting new concept. There was just one tiny problem. Eric Holm had sold the rights to Angel's Diner to Golden Corral. That's right, he sold the same restaurant concept to 2 different companies. It's unclear whether this was deliberate fraud or catastrophic incompetence, but either way, Vicorp was now in a legal battle with Golden Corral over who actually owned Angel's Diner. Golden Corral, being the larger and more aggressive company, made Vicorp an offer they couldn't refuse. Pay us $1 million and we'll let you have the exclusive rights. So, Vicorp, already struggling from the Sambo's debacle, paid Golden Corral $1 million just for the privilege of owning a concept that they had already bought. They built 7 Angel's Diner locations, 7. The concept flopped spectacularly. Vicorp realized Angel's Diner was not economically viable and wrote off $11 million on the venture. And Eric Holm, he filed for personal bankruptcy. Let that sink in. Vicorp paid Holm for restaurant rights, paid Golden Corral $1 million to resolve his mess, build 7 restaurants based on his concept, lost $11 million when they failed, and the guy who caused it all declared bankruptcy and walked away. By the mid-1990s, Vicorp was hemorrhaging money from multiple wounds: the Sambo's conversion disaster, the Angel's Diner fiasco, declining foot traffic at family dining restaurants, and increased competition from fast casual chains. Section 4. The First Bankruptcy. April 3rd, 2008, Vicorp filed for bankruptcy. The original Mrs. C's restaurant in Des Moines, the place where it all started in 1969, closed its doors on April 2nd, 2008. 1 day before the bankruptcy filing. The symbolism was brutal. Vicorp closed 56 company-owned restaurants, leaving 343 combined Village Inn and Baker Square locations. 7 locations in the Twin Cities closed, including restaurants in Plymouth, St. Anthony Village, Minnetonka, Burnsville, Stillwater, Minneapolis, and St. Paul. The bankruptcy filing cited decreased sales and high lease expenses. Corporate speak for, "We're paying too much rent on locations that don't generate enough money." A lot of those expensive leases, former Sambo's locations from 1984. The company that filed for bankruptcy looked nothing like the scrappy Midwest pie chain from 1983. Baker Square had peaked at 148 locations in 2001 with sales of $220 million. By 2010, they were down to 45 locations with sales of just $61 million, a 72% decline in revenue. The California expansion had completely collapsed. By February 2009, more than 80 California Baker Square locations had closed. Most buildings sat vacant. A few converted to competitors like Dupar's Restaurant and Bakery or Polly's Pies. The Los Angeles County Pie production facility in Santa Fe Springs also shut down. Michigan operations ceased entirely. The Wisconsin presence evaporated, and Baker Square was retreating back to its Midwest roots. But even there, the damage was done. Section 5, American Blue Ribbon and the Fidelity National Shuffle. In 2009, a newly formed investment group called American Blue Ribbon Holdings, owned by Fidelity National Financial and Newport Global Advisors, acquired the assets of I-Corp, including Village Inn and Baker Square, for about $55 million. On paper, this looked like a rescue. New money, new management, fresh start. American Blue Ribbon promised to revitalize both brands while maintaining the charm and friendly appeal of the original concepts. In reality, American Blue Ribbon was a weird corporate structure that would prove to be Baker Square's undoing. Here's how it worked. American Blue Ribbon Holdings operated Baker Square and Village Inn, but it relied entirely on a sister company called ABRH, also owned by Fidelity, for almost everything. ABRH operated O'Charlie's and 99 restaurants and provided support services to American Blue Ribbon. According to later bankruptcy filings, American Blue Ribbon did not have the contracts, infrastructure, or human resources to independently maintain their operations absent the services and staffing provided by ABRH. In other words, Baker Square couldn't function without its parent company's sibling doing all of the actual work. The setup was, to put it mildly, precarious. American Blue Ribbon tried various revival strategies. In 2011, they launched initiatives to improve staff training and hospitality. They expanded the legendary baking operation, the pie manufacturing business, which was producing 25 million pies annually for both restaurant chains and wholesale customers. But the fundamental problems remained. Declining foot traffic at the family dining restaurants, increased competition, and aging locations that needed expensive renovations that the company just couldn't afford. Section 6, the slow bleed. The decade under American Blue Ribbon ownership was death by 1,000 cuts. Baker Square continued closing locations as leases expired. The company simply didn't have the capital to remodel existing restaurants or open new ones. While competitors like Panera and Chipotle were building sleek new locations with modern decor, Baker Square restaurants looked increasingly dated. The business model itself was under assault. Family dining as a category was struggling. Millennials weren't eating at sit-down restaurants as frequently. Food delivery apps meant people could get any cuisine delivered to their homes. Casual dining traffic was declining industry-wide. And those pies, still winning awards, still beloved, weren't enough. You can't build a sustainable restaurant business on dessert alone, especially when grocery stores were selling similar pies for half the price. The company tried to cut costs wherever possible. Employee training suffered, service quality declined, food quality became inconsistent. It was a classic restaurant death spiral. Declining sales led to cost cuts, which led to declining quality, which led to more declining sales, which led to more cost cuts, and so on and so on. By 2017, American Blue Ribbon was reporting negative financial trends. The company lost $11 million in 2018, lost another $7 million in 2019. In 2019, desperate for cash, American Blue Ribbon closed and sold its support facility in Denver, closed and sold 3 restaurant properties, and accelerated collections of legendary baking receivables. These were all one-time sources of cash, financial maneuvers that provided temporary relief but solved nothing long-term. The company had to choose which bills to pay each month. Landlords were getting angry. Suppliers were demanding payment. Employees weren't sure if their paychecks would clear. Section 7, the second bankruptcy. Friday, January 24th, 2020. Baker Square restaurants in Alsip, Lansing, Libertyville, Orland Park, Maryville, Springfield, North Olmsted, Brooklyn Park, and Eden Prairie closed without warning. Employees showed up for their shifts to find the doors locked. No advance notice, no severance, just closed. Monday, January 27th, 2020, American Blue Ribbon Holdings filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The filing revealed the extent of the disaster. The company cited high wages, growing competition, and declining sales as reasons for the bankruptcy. They'd closed 33 locations across both Baker Square and Village Inn brands, representing a quarter of all restaurants, and laid off approximately 1,100 employees. After the closures, the company operated just 97 restaurants, 75 Village Inn locations, and 22 Baker Square restaurants. For perspective, Baker Square had gone from 143 locations in 2006 to just 22 in 2020. That's an 85% decline. The bankruptcy filing also revealed another critical fact. American Blue Ribbon had no secured debt, but ABRH, the sister company that provided all the support services, would no longer fund the company's losses. Translation: the parent company was cutting Baker Square loose. The corporate life support had been unplugged. Baker Square emerged from bankruptcy in September 2020 with 14 locations as a subsidiary of the restructured parent company now called VIB-SQ Holdings LLC. The pie manufacturing business became legendary Bank Holdings LLC, a separate company. December 2020, Baker Square closed its last Wisconsin location in Elm Grove. By the time VIB-SQ Holdings was ready to sell in 2021, Baker Square had been reduced to about 12 company-owned restaurants, all clustered in the upper Midwest. That's it. From 200 plus locations to 12 in less than 2 decades. Section 8. Famous Dave's to the rescue. In June 2021, Barbecue Holdings, the parent company of Famous Dave's barbecue chain and Granite City Food and Brewery, announced it would acquire Village Inn in Baker Square for $13.5 million. To put that in perspective, American Blue Ribbon had paid $55 million for these brands in 2009. 12 years later, they sold for less than a quarter of that price. Barbecue Holdings CEO Jeff Crivello said all the right things. Village Inn and Baker Square are wonderful additions that will only strengthen our portfolio of restaurants. I'm eager to begin forging a new growth path for both concepts. The acquisition closed in July 2021. Barbecue Holdings took over 21 corporate Village Inn restaurants, 114 franchised Village Inn restaurants, and 12 Baker Square restaurants. 12. Baker Square was now down to 12 locations. But Barbecue Holdings had a plan. Rather than trying to rebuild Baker Square as a traditional sit-down restaurant chain, they pivoted to ghost kitchens and virtual brands. In May 2022, Barbecue Holdings announced plans to triple Baker Square's footprint from 18 locations to 55 by the end of the year. All 37 new locations would be ghost kitchens. Baker Square pies would be sold out of existing Famous Dave's and Granite City kitchens. The strategy made sense, using existing kitchen capacity to sell high-margin pie products without the overhead of separate brick-and-mortar locations. It was basically turning Baker Square into a pie production and delivery business that happened to have a few remaining dine-in restaurants. As of 2024, Baker Square operates about 9 traditional restaurant locations in Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, and Ohio. The ghost kitchen experiment continues, though exact numbers are hard to pin down. Section 9. What really killed Baker Square? So, what destroyed a 50-year-old restaurant chain famous for award-winning pies? The Sambo's acquisition was the original sin. This can't be overstated. Vicorp's 1984 decision to buy 175 restaurants from a bankrupt, racist restaurant chain set off a chain reaction of problems that never stopped. Bad real estate, undersized locations, management spread too thin, money hemorrhaging from California and Florida operations. The company never recovered. The Angel's Diner fiasco compounded the damage. Losing $11 million on a scammed restaurant concept while still bleeding from Sambo's was pretty catastrophic. Vicorp entered the 2000s financially crippled. Family dining became dinosaur dining. The category itself was dying. By 2020, family dining had the worst performance of any restaurant segment, with comp sales down 20 to 25%. Nobody was eating at sit-down family restaurants anymore except older demographics. Young people wanted fast casual, food delivery, or unique dining experiences, not the same breakfast, lunch, dinner menu in a dated building. The private equity shell game, American Blue Ribbon's bizarre ownership structure relying on a sister company for all infrastructure, meant Baker Square never had true independence or resources to invest in its own future. When Fidelity decided to cut losses, ABRH pulled the plug and Baker Square crashed. Award-winning pies weren't enough. This is perhaps the saddest lesson. Baker Square genuinely had the best pies in America with over 300 first-place awards, but you can't build a restaurant empire on dessert alone, especially when supermarkets sell similar pies for a fraction of the price and delivery apps bring them straight to your door. Location, 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 all wrong. So many Baker Square's locations were former Sambo's buildings in declining areas with expensive leases. The company was stuck paying premium rents for subprime real estate that it couldn't afford to abandon because of lease obligations. Section 10. The Ghost of Mrs. C's. Here's what kills me about the Baker Square story. The original concept was perfect. A single restaurant in Des Moines serving home-style food and incredible pies. That's it. Simple, sustainable, beloved by locals. It sounds like a place I would love to go. Then Pillsbury bought it and tried to scale it. Then Vicorp bought it and scaled it bigger. Then they bought Sambo's and broke it. Then they got scammed by Eric Holm and broke it more. Then private equity bought it and slowly bled it dry over another decade. Each owner thought they could squeeze more value out of the brand, and each owner was wrong. The pies were always excellent. The American Pie Council awards kept coming. Legendary Baking still produces millions of pies annually. The product was never the problem. The problem was thinking that good pies could overcome bad real estate, worse acquisitions, private equity shenanigans, and the fundamental shift in how Americans eat. Today, if you want to experience Baker Square, you have 9 chances. A few locations scattered across the Midwest operating under BBQ Holdings, serving those same award-winning pies to a dwindling customer base who remembers when there were 200 locations and Mrs. C's was just a beloved restaurant in Des Moines. Or you can order a pie from a famous Dave's Ghost Kitchen and have it delivered, which honestly probably makes Mrs. C spin in her grave. Section 11. The Lesson Nobody Learned. The real tragedy of Baker Square isn't just the collapse of a single chain. It's that the same pattern keeps repeating across American restaurant brands. Take a successful local concept, scale it aggressively, make a catastrophic acquisition, get bought by private equity, cut all the costs until quality suffers, file bankruptcy, sell to new owners, repeat only until ghost kitchens remain. Baker Square went through its cycle twice. Boston Market went through it twice. How many other beloved regional chains are currently on bankruptcy number 1, heading inevitably towards bankruptcy number 2? The math never worked. Every owner thought they'd be the one to figure it out. Every owner was wrong because the fundamental problem, family dining restaurants with high overhead and declining traffic, never changed. BBQ Holdings, to their credit, isn't trying to rebuild the traditional restaurant business. They're using the Baker Square brand for what it always did best, selling pies. And that actually might work. But those 9 remaining dine-in Baker Square locations, they're museum pieces, artifacts of an era when families went to sit-down restaurants for meatloaf and French silk pie, when home meal replacement meant picking up food from a restaurant, not Uber Eats delivering from a ghost kitchen. The story of Baker Square is the story of American restaurant dining over the past 40 years. That's not how Mrs. C's story was supposed to end, but it's the only ending that makes sense in an industry where good food isn't enough and bad acquisitions are fatal. Baker Square. Best pie in America, 9 locations remaining.